So I want to keep us in this energy of this beautiful music. Just so glorious, it's beautiful. This band just took us to a beautiful place. I want to stay there. And so I'm going to invite you to use the power of your imagination and just imagine that you're in this serene place. You know, the whistles and bells and dings, emails and texts, the technology, the planes, the cars, the horns, it's all gone. We're just in this super serene place. For me, if I imagine that I'm sitting in a forest next to a river, and maybe I hear the water rolling and the breeze and moving through the trees, or maybe it's a beach and the tide is coming in and you can hear the mantra of the waves, you know, shoom, shoom. Or on a mountaintop and you see that vista of the world all around in the sky that just seems to go on forever. It can be a beautiful temple, right, where you really feel that presence of spirit. It can also just be in your home as you're sitting in your favorite chair and all the photos and memorabilia of life are all around you. And just in that place of peace, that place of connection, that place of communion. Because you and all of this life, all of this that is, just sort of comes together and it's one. It's that experience of oneness. We let go of all the labels, whatever those are, manager, minister, husband, wife, whatever. We let go of the labels and we're just in this serene communion with the allness of the allness of life. And so from this place, I want to read you a poem. This is a poem by Dale Bryan. It's a poem called Laughter. And he says, when the face we wear grows old and weathered, torn open by time, colors tinted as dawn like the late winter mountains of Sedona, ashen and crimson, it will no longer be possible to distinguish our deepest scars from the long, sweet lines left by laughter. So this poem really talks about how over time it all comes together, this laughter, this joy, this experience of life, as well as the scars and wounds and things that we've picked up. And we can't not pick up scars. I think if you're having a human experience, we're picking them up along the way. And for me, a lot of times those scars can show up in different ways, but a lot of times it is through relationship. And I actually wanted to read this quote, so I think I will. This is, I think this is Juliet. This is a William Shakespeare quote from Romeo and Juliet. I think this is a line by Juliet. And she says, is love a tender thing? It is too rough, too rude, too boisterous, and it pricks like thorn. Sometimes that can be the experience of love in the human form, right? It's not always this perfect, idealism. And when we come into those experiences, those scars, those wounds through relationship. And relationship is a big part of how we connect. And this is our theme this month. And in relationships and in connection, that is what Brené Brown is talking about in her book, Atlas of the Heart. And I hope that you're reading the book. If you're not, you can listen to it. It's on Audible. And if you don't want to do that, it's actually an HBO series. You can go watch the HBO series. So there's lots of different ways to access this material. And so this morning, I'm going to share with you some of my impressions of the book, but really what I want to do, rather than do a bad imitation of Brené Brown, I did think about it. I did think about coming as Brené. I thought, I got a jean jacket. I could put on a cowboy skirt. I couldn't find the wig, so next time I'll come as Brené. But rather than being a poor copy of Brené, I thought what I would do is take the material as I've interpreted, as I've internalized it, and find the connection to our teaching, which is science of mind, our teaching, our philosophy, our spirituality, so that it deepens it, right? In everyday life, when we meet up in relationships, a lot of things can come up. And she talks about this in the first couple of chapters. We can experience things like envy and jealousy and anxiety and stress. And one of our reactions to that often can be, I need to control. I need to control what's happening. I want to be in control. And the other part of control that we do is, in controlling it, we can actually step into this space of like, I need to make you comfortable, so I'm going to change who I am to ease the situation, right? And I don't want to make it wrong. I mean, I'm not a big fan of control, but you know, if that's how it unfolds, okay, fine. But I think what our teaching shares with us, and what I think is more relevant, is to approach those situations from a place of compassion. I think that's the tool that's going to get us where we want to go. And I know you're like, I've heard this before, but hang in there with me, because I think we're going to take it to a slightly different place. So don't check out. Stay with me. So I think about compassion as the key to moving through these experiences. You know, because one of the challenges with control is that it's like within it, as I'm trying to control the situation, there's an affirmation of, I don't trust the universe has my back. I have doubts about whether I'm safe or not. And so I have to force it to be in a place that is safe. Whereas compassion allows us to just live in this truth that we always are loved, that we always are safe, and we come from that place of authenticity. Something really powerful and magical happens. I had a class recently where Reverend Edward Valune came in and talked with us for a bit. And if you don't know Reverend Edward, he is at Centers for Spiritual Living in Santa Rosa, California. He was the head spiritual director of all of CSL Global for the last few years, and he's just recently stepped away from that, and someone new has taken over. And at Santa Rosa, that's where our friend Reverend Russ Laguerre is. Some of you know Russ. He's out there. And so Reverend Edward is this amazing minister and speaker and wise soul. And he was sharing with us this idea that sometimes in our teaching we can get confused about, we confuse love with agreement. That we move into this space of, if I'm going to love you, I have to agree with you. And he was sharing with us that you really don't have to do that. That in this zone of compassion, in this experience of compassion, I can meet you with love, but I don't have to agree with you. I don't necessarily have to say yes to everything that you're saying yes to. And one of the tools that we can use to really investigate what's happening in this dynamic is curiosity. So we start to ask lots of questions. Like, why do you feel that way? A really great question that Reverend Edward suggested is, so if this is your worldview, where do I fit into that worldview? And you start to get them to talk, and what happens as they start to talk, if their premise, if their energy, if their attitude is coming from a place of limited belief, of fear, it starts to disassemble. It starts to fall apart. Now, you may see it in the moment, you may not. They may walk away, and I live in the faith of knowing that that is going to continue to churn, and something is going to transform there. So this compassion, this love is given, and it's a gift that we give to ourselves, because when we're in the zone of compassion, we are fully present. If I'm in the zone of control, or I'm in the zone of reactivity, I can't be fully present to you, because I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. I am so focused on myself. I'm so focused on what's happening with me. I am not even completely present for you. But when I let go and I'm in compassion, I can be really fully present. I can be my authentic self. And there's a freedom that comes from that, right? There's a freedom and a freeing of my own true self, my own authentic self. There's a book by David Rico that I absolutely love. It's called How to Be an Adult. If there was ever a book that was written for me, and he says in this book, I'm going to read his quote. He says, when talking about freedom and how much freedom he really wants for himself, he says, I am free enough to want everything I say and do to reveal me as me. That is the power that we're looking for. That is the centering that we're looking for in this. That we really are called in with our spiritual teaching to be our authentic self, to be fully present and to be fully aware. Yeah, I'm just reading my notes. I'm like, oh yeah, that's good. So we know in our teaching, we can know when we're doing prayer, when we're doing counseling, when we're sharing with each other, we can share that I know that for you. I can know for you great love. I can know for you an expanded understanding. I can know for you acceptance. I can know that for you. And that's coming from a place of compassion. And what is important about a compassion is to remember that it has to be reciprocal. And this is really a place where we can get a little tripped up, so it's not. So when I say that compassion is reciprocal, it isn't necessarily that the other person's going to reciprocate and have compassion for you. Because we can't control that, right? That's not in our control. And if we try to control it, it never really doesn't work. But what I mean by it's reciprocal is that as you're sharing compassion for others, you must turn it around and share the compassion for yourself. As your love is expressing for others, you must turn that around and love yourself, which means that sometimes you have to walk away from someone. Sometimes this is, you've done what you can do and you have to take care of yourself in that. You have to have compassion for yourself. So being in this spiritual teaching and being a spiritual person doesn't mean that you have to stay with every single person who's behaving in ways that just doesn't work for you. You do not have to be in a situation that is wounding. Sometimes I think they say something like words to the effect of, you have to love yourself before you can love others, which is perfectly fine. I like to think of it this way. I'm happy if I don't fully love myself yet, and sometimes there are days, but if I don't fully love myself yet, what I think about when I'm trying to and working on and loving others, I'm looking at Mina, when I love others it's good practice. It's good practice for how to love. It's good practice for how to be gentle with someone, how to be kind, how to speak kindly. And then you can turn that around. That's the trick. You can't just stop there. You have to turn it around. You have to hold yourself with tenderness. You have to hold yourself with kindness. Think about some of the self-talk that some of us have had, right? When we're talking about compassion, let's do this. Let's do this thought experiment. I like this. Imagine that there's somebody in front of you, and it's somebody that really has irritated you, has really bugged you. Somebody that really and I always recommend with these things on a Sunday morning that we just find where the stakes are a little bit low. Like, they cut me off in traffic, or something like that. I mean, you can do bigger if you want to, but I always like to try and play around with things that are a little lower stakes. And you would really, if they were in the moment and you're in that dynamic, you really want to give them a piece of your mind. You really want to, you have a few choice words you want to share with them, right? Do you imagine that? Now imagine that that person is moved out and spirit is moved in, that God is moved in, that whatever your avatar is for that communion that we were just in when we did our poem, whatever that is for you. How would you talk to them? How would you speak to them? What words would you use? How would it change your body language? That is the energy of compassion. And we start to recognize that every single relationship that we have, the way it's showing up in life is, yes, a relationship with a person, but a relationship with spirit. And it's reflecting our relationship with spirit because we have one, right? And this brings us to this idea that in our spiritual teaching, and if we're going to live this stuff, we're not going to just going to talk about it, but we're actually going to live it, really live it, then we have a responsibility in the way that we show up and the way that we are in our relationships. And responsibility, so I was thinking about this a lot. I was like, oh my God. Responsibility can feel like weighty. It can feel, I don't want to do it, you know. But so what I've done and what I'm offering to you is to break it down. Break it in half. Break the word responsibility into two words. Responsibility. This is our ability to respond. That's what we're cultivating. That's what we're honing. That's what we're practicing. As we speak to Spirit in and through that person that annoys us, that person that, is driving us crazy. I'm going to speak to Spirit here, and I'm going to hone and practice my ability to respond in a way that is loving and kind and curious. Why are you acting that way? Do you not see what you're doing? Tell me more about why you think this is the right way to be right here, right now. So that responsibility becomes responsibility. And one of the things that is really interesting about this, particularly if we want to take it really deep into our teaching that we do here in our spiritual center, we use a process called affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment. And affirmative prayer has 5 steps. In fact, we'll do an affirmative prayer when I finish jabbering. And the first step of that 5-step prayer is recognition. That recognition presupposes that we have a relationship, right? It assumes a relationship with Spirit. So we are calling that in as we begin that prayer process. We start to understand that relationship, as we call it in and presence it for ourselves, that is where our responsibility shows up. We have that communion that we started with that is always present and ever expressing through us. And so as we start our prayer work, as we start our relationship work, we are coming from that place of connection, that place of responsibility. So as you can tell, you can get really deep with this. Like I could go on and on. I mean, it really starts to, as you start to really dig into it and how it connects to our spiritual teaching, you can really start to have a very big conversation. This is really just the beginning. I am just sort of teasing out a few of the ideas that are showing up for me. And I know the speakers that are following me in the weeks to come are going to take this really, really deep as they get into Brené's book. Brené really frames it as the places that takes us, right? When I get stressed, where does it take me? When I get anxious, where does it take me? And how do we navigate that? And she gives us beautiful language to help give us some context and help give it some perspective so that we can move through those things with some grace. And then what we're doing here on Sundays is taking that into our teaching of science of mind and understanding that that doesn't just live between you and me. It lives between me and Spirit. That is about how my relationship with Spirit gets bogged down and clogged up with some of these beliefs. One of the things that I did when we first started the visualization with the poem is I asked you to let go of labels. So these labels are really about expectations. And she talks about this, I think, in chapter 3 of the book. She really talks about expectations. And expectations, the way she talks about it, I really like. She talks about expectations like, there's like expectations, like I'm going to share with you, this is what's expected, blah, 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 blah. And then she talks about the other kind of expectation that she calls stealth expectations. I love this. These are the expectations that we put on each other, but we never tell each other. They're secret. They're not communicated. And a lot of ways that can show up is like through labels, right? So I'm the oldest. Everybody thinks that means something. Everybody expects something, but it's never really, maybe parts of it are shared, but a lot of it isn't shared. Or I'm the minister. And suddenly there's expectations that we say or don't say around that, or we're expecting, or you're my spouse. Well, that means, have I ever said that? Have I ever shared that? Have I ever talked about it? No, it's just, I expect you. And then we get into that dynamic of, well, you should just know. You should just know why I'm angry. Right? So those stealth expectations, it still comes back to compassion. Becoming conscious of the fact that we hold on to these expectations is really one of the first things we can do to move into a more compassionate life. And it's really incumbent upon all of us to do this if we're really practicing science of mind. And then, in that awareness, we get to choose, we get to decide what we share, how we share. We have more, interestingly enough, as we give up the control and move into compassion, we actually have more control, because we can actually share out and presence what's really, really going on, and allow, one of our missions here is to create safe spaces. When we allow ourselves to be our authentic selves, we make space for someone else to be authentic too. We have created a safe space to really share and deepen in this conversation. And of course, what may come to light is that some relationships just don't serve us, and we can release them. I did want to read this other thing to you that I found this morning, actually, which is why it's not printed, but I thought this was really beautiful. This is a reporter asked this Dutch-born clergyman, A.J. Muste, M-U-S-T-E, or Must, asked him, he was protesting, and he said, this was back during the Vietnam War, and he said, do you really think that you're going to change the policies of the country by standing out here alone at night in front of the White House holding a candle? And his response was, oh, I don't do this to change the country. I do this so the country won't change me. So part of what this is all about is when we're in that control place, we can come into a place of it shifting and changing me to something that I don't want to be. So I come back to the key is compassion, the key is being curious. And the curiosity really helps take the sting out of the emotional response and being our authentic selves. And what happens is it leads us into a place that may be a little uncomfortable, but it leads us into vulnerability. And Brené Brown, of all people, is the teacher of vulnerability and teaches us that our power lives in our vulnerability. Right? So the anchor we are searching for is connection. The process for connection is compassion. And we are called on in our teaching, if we're really going to be metaphysicians, if we're really going to do this, we're called on to really live this truth with a capital T. Right? So I think for now I'm going to leave it here. I think I've raised some questions, I've said a few good things, and it may just be a taste of what Brené Brown is sharing in her book and how it connects to our teaching. And this interweaving of itself in our principles, I want you to think on it, meditate on it, journal on it, get prayer on it, and see what comes up for you. Because a lot of times, I'm sure if I'm saying to you, be compassionate in every relationship, one of the first things that comes up for me is, well, I'm never going to be able to be compassionate in that relationship. I can think of one, right off the bat. So in that dissonance, this is something else we've talked about in class, in my program. When we encounter dissonance in the science of mind, when we've encountered dissonance in our philosophy, that is a great place to do some exploration. And I have to say, just as I said before, love does not mean agreeing with everyone. It doesn't mean agreeing with everything. You do not have to agree with everything that is taught in science of mind. The idea is that you are finding your authentic self, your authentic path, your authentic way of being. And so let's take all that into prayer and just really pray that up this morning. And so I just recognize as we started together in this conversation, we started in this place of communion, and I really wanted us to stay there. I really want to call that in and know that we can call it in any time and any place. That communion with life, that communion with love, that communion with nature, the communion with all this beauty and bounty that is in and through all that is. It is unconditional love. It is the activity of life. It is the energy of life. This is truth. This is source. This is spirit. This is God, your word, Yahweh, Allah, whatever your word. And I just know and feel and experience my oneness with it. It is not something that is separate and apart from me. It is something that I am swimming in, I am living in, I am breathing in, I am feeling in. And I know this for myself. I know this for each person in this room, each person of my friends online. I love you all online people. Thank you for being here. I know this oneness is true for each and every single person. And so from this place of oneness, I just claim and know that there is great grace that is happening in all of our relationships, that we are presencing grace in a way that perhaps we haven't before. We are deepening our skill and our intention to be in compassion. And this brings us to our authentic selves, where we are our true self. We are not code switching and changing and adapting and trying to make you and people please. We are just who we are, and we are holding into that and allowing our compassion to move forward. And I know that this is creating a shift. I know this is creating transformation. I know this is deepening my experience with spirit, and I know this perfection of spirit is expressing in and through me as wholeness, as peace. Peace that is starting right here. World peace that I pray for all the time is starting right here with the person in front of me. And I know that this is connecting me ever deeper with spirit, because the person in front of me is spirit. And I'm so grateful for it. I am so grateful for this realization, this revelation. I'm so grateful for Brené Brown giving us the language that helps us understand all that's happening in this human experience and how we can take that forward. I'm so grateful for Ernest Holmes and Science of Mind that helps us understand our own spiritual nature and how we connect our human experience and our spiritual experience together. And we weave it into this truth that we're living. I am so grateful for these blessings. I am so grateful for this community and its continued vitality and abundance. I am so grateful for all that is. I release this now into the action of law, knowing that as I do this in my faith, in my knowing that Spirit has me, in knowing that my Spirit has my back, in knowing that Spirit is always present and always unfolding in beautiful, bountiful ways, I release this trusting that all is well. And collectively together we say, and so it is.
So it is.